little lost.
Well, we made it, people. 200 episodes. So what can I possibly review for such an occasion? Okay, what the hell. Let's review One More Day.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man, punch, wears a purdy hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazons and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara sits down nonetheless and forces himself through it. A poorly written, ugly mess, but someone's gotta do it. And it's right about time he did. They made Watchmen without the slimy squid. And he'll have you know that that's pretty low, but not quite like the standards of the 90s kid. Setting ablaze crossovers, one-shots and tie-ins. Linkara stands in reality defiance atop the fourth wall, looking down on us all. Of course, don't you know anything about science? There would be better books on his show, but Casada sold them to Mephisto, and now there's nothing left to do but share the scrapings at the bottom of the barrel with you. Linkara, he is a man, punch, what's that on his arm? Linkara, can't seem to fix the continuity alarm. Linkara, rock and roll, insane, some fella in a tux. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
One day more, another day, another destiny, this never-ending road to Calvary.
If there's a single story that has hung over this show since the first episode, it's One More Day. Spider-Man literally makes a deal with the devil. Yeah, these days, heroes have to make deals with the devil.
Wife he can come home to. Oh, wait.
He should make a deal with Mephisto, since Mephisto—
Maybe it was Mephisto.
I'll get on the hotline to Mephisto! Like One More Day! JMS and One More Day. Why I hate One More Day. Considering my own thing with One More Day, Spider-Man and Mary Jane's little tryst with Satan traded life with her for life with his dying awe to the devil. So of course they had to have the devil. Spider-Man's deal with the devil, making a deal with the literal devil. Please, I've consorted with Satan. Spider-Man makes a deal with the devil. I hate you. Yeah, I think I might have brought it up once or twice. The more nitpicky among you may also recall that I've stated that my only problem with the book was the ending, and the rest of it was fine. Others will say that it's completely unnecessary, since I've technically already reviewed the comic in my Top 15 Comics I'll Never Review episode, wherein I spoke for 5 minutes about the thing that angered me so about this story. Well, first of all, that's not really a review, that's me ranting about a plot point. Secondly, I decided to take another look at it, and you know what? There's a hell of a lot more that's wrong with this crap than just the ending. And I'm sure there is one other complaint that people would have with me doing this. That would be, come on, Linkara, it's been 5 years since One More Day. Are you still not over this? Nope! Not at all! However, even if I was over it, there's one underlying problem. It's still a bad story! It was a bad story in 2007, and it's a bad story now! Cry for Justice sucked in 2009, and it still sucks now. Youngblood sucked in 1992, and it still sucks now. And guess what? This is Atop the Fourth Wall where bad comics burn. Let's dig into Spider-Man One More Day and break down why this thing sucks. I'm reading from a trade, so no analysis of the covers. However, the covers are where you will find my few compliments to this book. The first 3 parts feature kind of a retro style to them with exaggerated melodramatic captions. The 4th book avoids that, but has great symbolism on the broken picture of him and Mary Jane, kind of echoing that broken photo from the cover of Identity Crisis. It's just a good image to use for this. Now, before we get into the book itself, there's a lot of backstory to cover here, so I think it's necessary.
Hello, Linkara. It is I, the devil.
Oh, hi, Bennett.
Not Bennett, the devil. I have come to you with an offer
to exchange my soul, or my show, or my non-existent marriage to erase one more day, right?
Well, yeah,
Not interested! Goodbye!
Ugh, come on, man. I went and put on the outfit. Can you play out the bit?
The bit is dead, Bennett! Not to mention, the deal doesn't take place for another 3 issues. You can make the offer again when it actually comes up in the comic.
Oh, okay. See you then.
So, anyway, backstory. In 2006, Marvel released its standard big crossover event, Civil War. The premise is that after an incident involving superheroes results in the deaths of 600 people, including 60 children, the American government rushes out a Superhero Registration Act that forces all superheroes to reveal their identities to the government and officially fall under federal mandate. Iron Man led the charge in the pro-registration camp, while Captain America led a faction of heroes who opposed it. Civil War has a lot of problems, not the least of which being that Marvel refused to actually say what the Superhuman Registration Act stated, leading to different books interpreting it differently. Now, Marvel's excuse was that the act was just so long and complicated that there was no way to release it in full and could be interpreted in different ways, but I call bullcrap on that. It's lazy writing, plain and simple. The other big problem with the book was the ending. Despite the fact that the pro-registration side was vilified throughout not only the main book, but also the tie-ins, the book ended with the pro-registration side winning, and follow-up interviews stated that they were supposed to be the right side all along. I haven't decided yet if I'm ever going to do a full review of Civil War, mostly because it's a very polarizing, politically charged book, but needless to say, it's not very good. Now, where does Spidey fit into all of this? Well, to make a long story short, Aunt May had discovered Peter's identity as Spider-Man, and after an incident where their home had been destroyed, Tony Stark invited Peter, Mary Jane, and Aunt May to live in Avengers Tower. Spidey was also a member of the Avengers at the time. Tony convinced Peter that the pro-registration side was the right thing to do, and that with the resources of the government, he'd be able to protect him, Mary Jane, and May from any villains who would seek revenge against them. As such, he publicly unmasked to the entire world. However, for reasons I can't quite recall, he eventually turns on the pro-registration side and runs away with MJ and May. While staying at a motel, a sniper hired by the Kingpin attempts to assassinate Peter, but instead shoots and injures Aunt May. And that's where we're at. Peter is a well-known fugitive, Aunt May is clinging to life for the gajillionth time, and during this time, Peter put his black costume back on again, and then took it off, because Spider-Man 3 had just happened. Yeah, the movies still screw around with stuff like this all the time. We begin with Amazing Spider-Man number 544, where a red bird is flying around the night sky. Tune your ear to the frequency of despair, and cross-reference by the longitude and latitude of a heart in agony. Listen, listen. First sentence! That is one of the dumbest, most overwritten, nonsensical sentences ever put into a mainstream story! This is punk is nothing but death, crime, and the rage of a beast level of what the hell were you thinking? Tune your ear to the frequency of despair? What the Sam flippin' hell is that supposed to mean? Cross-referenced by the longitude and latitude of a heart in agony? So we're trying to track something on a map now? What? Is this still connected to the frequency of despair? What does an audio frequency have to do with map coordinates of a heart in agony? And finally, most important of all, this comic tells us to tune our ears and listen, listen. Kind of confusing instructions considering this is a comic book which we read with our eyes. The rest of the page shows the bird approaching a hospital and Peter narrating about what happened with Aunt May, rightfully pointing out that he should have skipped town. I'd give anything, do anything to bring her back from the edge, to have just one more day with her. And that's a lie, because in another comic, you spend time with her in mental projection form, where she tells you to let her go, and you ignore her instructions. Consistency! You suck at it! Worlds turn on such thoughts. No, they don't. Because the universe hears them. I refer you to my last remark. In the hospital, Aunt May lies in bed with life support equipment attached to her. Joe Quesada himself did the artwork for One More Day, and I admit there are some shots that really do work. This one, despite some wonky perspective and proportions, is one of them. What doesn't work is the writing, wherein Peter whines yet again that this is all his fault. We'll get into that a bit later. In the meantime, the doctor goes up to them and explains that, unfortunately, because she doesn't have any insurance, they're gonna have to move her to the charity care ward. Peter is indignant about it, but the doctor points out that they're just barely picking up brain function, so chances are she's pretty much dead anyway. If you had some kind of health insurance, that would be one thing. A bottomless checkbook would be even better.
I mean, if we only had a wheelbarrow, that would be something.
Peter decides to go see a man with a bottomless checkbook. The doctor chases after him as he starts to leave. Just a minute. What? I just wanted to say I know what you're feeling, and you have no idea what I'm feeling. No one has ever lost a loved one before me! You know, I seriously considered reading all of Peter Parker's lines in the Superboy Prime voice. It really does come across as that selfish and whiny. The doctor explains that Spider-Man once saved his uncle's life and that he promised he'd repay the favor one day. He shows Peter the newspaper of his unmasking, revealing he knows who he really is. Wait, where the hell did that paper come from? Was he just carrying that around with him everywhere? Anyway, he says he can't do anything to actually get her any big procedure, but he can stall putting Aunt May off into a charity ward or anything until he comes back. Peter swings through the city, narrating that he doesn't give a damn about not having the costume on, since everyone knows what he looks like anyway. Strange that nobody else in the hospital recognized him then. Or did the mustachioed Dr. Kelso back at the hospital cover his face as he was going in with May? I also noticed the red Mephisto bird right there. I can't help but wonder if Marvel ever considered doing a what-if story where Peter swings right into the bird and accidentally smashes it against some glass. Anyway, he arrives at Stark Tower and makes a big scene, breaking into Stark's office from the air vents. Naturally, Tony Stark is a genius and is already way ahead of him, armoring up and smacks right into Peter, knocking him out a window. Instead of trying to talk to Tony, he just webs up his engines, forcing the two of them to crash. Iron Man points out the fact that that little stunt could have gotten them both killed. Wanted to make sure you didn't fly off before I was done with you. And then I'd break my own spine so I couldn't leave either. Wait. Iron Man tries to arrest Peter, but to make a long story short, Peter webs up Iron Man into a giant cocoon. He then rips off Tony's mask so the two can talk. Aunt May is dying! She's dying and it's your fault! I trusted you! I let you get close to me! You were like a father to me! Not really, no. He wasn't. Anyway, he keeps ranting that this is all Tony's fault and that he needs to go help Aunt May since she was an innocent in all of this. Wait, weren't you ranting earlier that this was all your fault, Peter? Look, I know you're still in the anger stage of grief, but at least make up your mind who you're blaming for all of this. Tony, unfortunately, refuses for the dumbest of reasons. Any direct help I gave to you could be tracked back to me. I could be held liable for aiding and abetting a known criminal. She's an old woman who got shot in the chest. I don't think anybody's gonna be that pissed that you paid for her medical care. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that she's not the wanted fugitive. It would undermine everything I've been trying to build since the war. No, it really wouldn't. In fact, I think anyone who criticized your decision to help her would, in reality, look like the bigger douchebag for saying so! An innocent old woman was shot in the chest by a sniper because she happened to be related to a person who has saved thousands, if not millions of lives. Let her die. But actually, let's turn this around, shall we? There is a very easy solution to this, one that either of them could suggest. Hell, there was absolutely no reason for Peter to go in all brazen and pissy like he did when he could have just knocked on the window and done this. Peter could offer to be arrested. He could willingly surrender himself to the authorities as long as May gets treatment. But you see, he can't do that, because that would involve taking responsibility for what he's done. Allow me to share a revelation I've had. For all of his bluster about, with great power comes great responsibility, Peter Parker is one of the most irresponsible superheroes ever. He never learns from his mistakes, never takes into consideration how his life as Spider-Man affects everybody else. Now, some would say that's the core concept of the character, the constant struggle between the mask and the man. But he never actually gives any consideration to the man, preferring to make excuses about it. He disappoints people around him all the time because something more important was happening as Spider-Man. But instead of trying to find ways to balance his two lives properly, he will go out of his way to make excuses and just be sad that being Spider-Man hurt his personal life. If he places more importance on being Spider-Man, then he should distance himself from relationships that would hurt that. If he places more emphasis on being Peter Parker, he needs to sacrifice his time as Spider-Man. Now, that's not always going to be the case for everyone in the real world. But Peter never actually changes as a result of his actions. He just makes the same mistakes over and over. During a storyline called The Other, when Peter was dying from an untraceable condition, this was also written by JMS by the way, he admits that he doesn't even have life insurance. Peter has never made a plan about what would happen to his family if he were killed by a supervillain. He's never thought about the repercussions of his life if he should be maimed or killed while wearing the costume, to his wife or to his constantly dying aunt. In a recent issue of Avengers Academy, a group of teenage superheroes thought of several ways that he could have capitalized on being Spider-Man without revealing his identity to anyone. Now, admittedly, he was just a young, dumb teenager when he started out and didn't think of those things. But Peter is and has been an adult for decades now. Forget about whether you like Spidey being married or not. The character himself still seems to operate like he's in high school, never growing up, never seems to recognize adult relationships, and never actually taking responsibility for his life and the choices he's made. This is one of the reasons I decided to finally review One More Day. The deal with Mephisto is symptomatic of a bigger problem for the character and the people who write him. The unwillingness for the character to become an adult. He's supposed to be roughly 25 years old at the time of this story, maybe closer to 30, and yet he repeatedly approaches his problems like a 16-year-old would, and is never actually prepared to act like a mature adult. I've made several jokes in the last 200 episodes about how Peter Parker's life is an endless spiral of shame and misery, what with his friends and loved ones dying all around him or becoming supervillains because of his life as Spider-Man. And I mean it. The truth is that if Peter Parker ever cared about taking responsibility for his actions, he would have given up being Spider-Man a long time ago. But hey, maybe that's just the reasoning of a jaded individual looking at this stupid-ass comic in hindsight. Of course I don't want Peter Parker to stop being Spider-Man. What I want is for him to be written like a goddamn adult already. But the writers, and Marvel editorial, seem to steadfastly refuse to let that happen. Spider-Man is just escapist fantasy to them. The reason why they don't think there's drama in marriage is because marriage is an aspect of real life, and they don't want the escapism of Peter Parker swinging through the air and stopping bad guys being infected with the drama of things that people have to endure in the real world. And that's just hilarious, since Spider-Man is supposed to be the character who does face the real-life challenges of the world. That was what made his character so appealing to begin with, his ability to relate to the reader. But the truth is that the reader has grown up. The reader got married, had kids, has relatives that die, and they have to move on. The reader changed, but Peter Parker has not. You know, recently there was a rumor that Marvel was doing its own reboot to compete with the one DC did last year. They're not, of course, they're just releasing a whole bunch of new #1s. But you know what? Maybe they should reboot Spider-Man. After all, if the creative teams are unwilling to let him get out of his high school life, then why the hell isn't he still there?
Hello, Linkara.
Last Angry Geek?
No, it's Cloak #1.
Oh, right, you're a different character from him. People have been confused about that.
They think that's confusing? Why am I suddenly one of your bad guys when you weren't even in the group I was harassing in Suburban Nights? Wouldn't it make more sense if I were this guy?
I am a creature of the ancient world. I demand respect!
Wait, what the hell is that?
Well, Spoonie destroyed my original one, and this is my backup.
Oh, get out! Anyway, Linkara, I've got an offer to make to you. I can make One More Day disappear forever, and then...
Sure you can! And if One More Day never existed, that would mean I never did a crossover with The Last Angry Geek about One Moment in Time, right?
I'll call you back.
Anyway, enough of my rambling. Back to the comic. Tony Stark arrives back to his tower and finds a photo taped to his wall of him celebrating with Peter, MJ, and May at some party. Damn it, I really need to stop taping random, ironic, sepia-toned photographs to my walls. Jarvis, the Avengers' butler, walks in and asks him if he needs anything. Tony tells him there is one thing he can do, and we cut back to the hospital, where Jarvis is arriving, claiming to be May's cousin. And naturally, he has brought a bottomless checkbook. There's a good moment where Jarvis has to stop and collect himself. See, he and May were developing a relationship in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. We'll bring that up again later. However, the doctor says that at her age, there really isn't anything else they can do. Son, there's nothing humanly possible to stop her from dying. Damn it, if only we knew a way to treat a gunshot wound to the chest! Curse you, medical science! Peter leaves again, saying he'll find somebody out there who can help, ending the issue with him swinging off as Spider-Man. So the truth here is that this entire issue accomplished nothing, since we're right back where we started. He also has the costume on now, even though he said earlier he's not playing games, and it doesn't matter. Wow, a full quarter of the way through the story, and nothing has happened.
Here's a good idea. Have a point.
Part 2 opens with Spidey swinging towards what appears to be an abandoned building. In reality, it's the home of Doctor Strange, who is still in hiding after the events of Civil War. I have to see you, Doc. It's a matter of life and death. It is never anything less that brings someone to my door. Yes, even for the mailman. Spidey explains what's happening and was hoping that magic could offer some assistance. Instead, Doctor Strange feels the need to talk about his origin story. Long ago, my hands were shattered in an accident, rendered useless for someone who wished to be a doctor, a surgeon, a healer, a dental technician, a nutritionist, a reconstructive urologist. I searched the world for someone who could fix them. My quest took me to the Himalayas, where I met the man who I would one day call Master. Until that time, I called him Larry. He told me that there are limits to what even a sorcerer supreme can do. He could not fix my hands, but he could give me a purpose and the chance to save lives. Had he simply healed me, there would have been no one to stand between the forces of dark and light when intercession was most needed. Who knows what could happen if the McRib became a permanent menu item? Then again, this is stupid beyond belief. Not only is this guy the master of the mystic arts, but he's a skilled neurosurgeon of the highest caliber. And don't give me any crap about how his hands don't work for surgery anymore. He can't conjure up magical telekinetic hands to do it for him. He can't cast a spell to take over the body of someone else and use their perfectly good hands. Or hell, he can't just consult and advise on a procedure? Oh no! Bullet wounds are completely outside of his power! What a load! Peter says he'd be able to accept this if she died peacefully in her bed, but since this is his fault, he refuses to let it happen. Dead is dead, Peter. With the way you're acting, even if she had died in bed, I can only imagine that you'd be dragging her corpse around everywhere trying to find a zombie spell. Oh, but it gets better, my friends. Doctor Strange is incapable of healing a bullet wound, but he is able to break the laws of space and time so Spidey can visit multiple places in the world at the same time to consult everyone he needs to in the hope of finding someone who can help Aunt May. This is truly incredible, people. He sees Mr. Fantastic, who can build dimensional portals but not heal bullet wounds. He visits Hank Pym, who can make himself grow or shrink, but not heal bullet wounds. He visits the Black Panther, whose country that he runs is the most technologically advanced in the world, which includes medical technology, but he can't help heal a bullet wound. None of them can help. He even visits Dr. Octopus and Dr. Doom. The answer is the same from all of them. There's nothing they can do to help. This is insanity! I could see Dr. Octopus being able to help, but refusing because he hates Spider-Man. But Dr. Doom? Come on! This is the kind of bullcrap he lives for. He would make Peter grovel and talk about how awesome he is, and then he would accept in return for a favor at a later time, or information, or to serve him for the rest of his life, or some bullcrap like that. Admittedly, his solution would probably turn Aunt May into a cyborg or something, but it'd save her life, and Peter would accept in a heartbeat. I'm sorry, I still can't get over this. Dr. Strange, you can make space and time play dead and roll over. You can get Peter to consult with the smartest people on the planet all at the same time who have fixed a lot worse problems than this. But no. This is completely outside your power. There's contrivances to make your stupid-ass story work, and then there's, we're too lazy to think of a better explanation. This is a remarkably simple thing to write out. Doctor Strange wasn't at the Sanctum. He was in another dimension, or you could say he was fighting some other creature at the time. Boom! Spidey wouldn't have had time before Aunt May died to consult with many people, and he would have had no way to contact them. There, done. Oh, no. We need to make it so completely hopeless that it is simply ludicrous. I am calling this what it is. Lazy. Anyway, this little spell has drained Spidey, and Doctor Strange walks away for a minute to get him some water. Peter, seeing the magical doodad that let him take a joyride on the space-time continuum, decides to try screwing around with it on his own. Oh, yeah, that seems like a good idea, Petey. Stay the course. You just know he's going to end up smeared across 3 different countries in 5 different time periods. And now it is time for the meat of this issue. Complete and utter pointlessness. Using Doctor Strange's little handheld TARDIS, Peter has been sent back in time to the night where the assassin shot Aunt May. The problem, however, is that Peter is stuck in an astral projection. He can't touch anything, and no one can see or hear him. All that he does for 6 pages is relive the events of an issue published previously. Okay, he also briefly fights Lovecraft's line of children's toys, but again, pointless! It all happens again, and Spidey's astral self is dragged back to the Sanctum Sanctorum by Doctor Strange so he can be healed. There's some more pointless callbacks to a Spider-Man issue from a long while back, and then Strange returns to Peter, who asks why he can heal his wounds now, but not heal Aunt May. Magical cures for magical ills. Ha ha ha! Bull crap! Not only has Doctor Strange healed people before without it being magical in nature, but in one moment in time, the follow-up to One More Day, he heals Mary Jane, who was injured by another assassin. Where the hell have you been? It's been like a year. Strange tries to reassure Peter that there was nothing he could have done to help May and that it isn't his fault and he doesn't need to feel guilty. Yeah, well, the day I actually believe that, I'll be sure to let you know. You know, if May had died, I bet there would be a bell tower and a rifle in your future, Petey. Also, dear God, the artwork! What is wrong with your face? Anyway, Doctor Strange's final advice for Peter is that he should go and spend whatever time May has left with her, since her spirit is still there and can hear him. And so Peter leaves and spots the red Mephisto bird, following it for some reason. However, the story ends with a little girl with red hair appearing in front of Peter and telling him that she can change his destiny. Congratulations! Half your story is finished, and nothing has been accomplished. I can think of like 3 ideas right off the top of my head that this time could have been spent doing, like building up Peter's desperation. We could have had an entire issue of Peter reflecting on May's life with him, the good and the bad, really connect emotionally and see why he's not ready to let her go. Put him in a position where we can understand why he's so desperate beyond a few lame sentences about how it's all his fault. We could have seen him appealing to people who were in the area instead of giving him some astral projection into the past and to all the people who should have been able to help, or maybe add a ticking clock variable that implied that they couldn't get there in time or something. But no, we are now halfway into the story and have achieved nothing that we didn't already know. But now it's time for part 3, where the girl with red hair appears to him.
Hello, Linkara. You might not be able to make One More Day have a point, but I can.